Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This week I'm with Ash. Ash, I know you've been very active on LinkedIn, and I know you've released this poll, and I want to hear about the results. So we're talking this week about how many listeners you need to monetize your podcast. So tell us about the poll. I want to hear about the results.
So I was curious to know what people's first thoughts would be. So I created a poll. How many listeners do you need? A few options: 1,000 plus. I think 500 to 750, 100 to 250, and then one. I had an option as just one. And obviously we spoke to a lot of people, and a few people, quite a few more than I expected, put one, but the majority put over 1,000. Most people were like, you need over 1,000 listeners to monetize, which I thought was very interesting. There's two completely different sides of it, and it's almost a bit of a trick question in terms of when we say you need one to monetize. But I'll let you take the reins with that one. Explain why you can monetize with one.
All right, so let's add a bit of context from your like connections and followers on LinkedIn. A quick plug in the show notes.
Yeah,
follow Ash desperately.
Help.
Who would you say is the bulk of your following? Is it like professionals or podcast hosts?
A lot of them are podcast hosts. A lot of them are business coaches. I have not a connection with business coaches, but mostly podcast hosts or people involved in the podcast industry in some way, be it producers, be it agency owners.
Like the professionals.
The podcast professionals for the most part, or podcast hosts.
And from what you've seen, did you notice like a difference in the type of like who they were to where they voted? Like, was it mostly like professionals saying 1,000 plus? Was it mostly hosts saying 1,000 plus?
You'd be surprised. It was actually quite a mix. So there was professionals saying 1,000 plus. I'm trying to think if any of professionals said one. Everyone who said one was people I feel like I know or I've spoken to.
Right, yeah. Seen our content before.
Yeah, seen it before. I even had one guy comment, Matt, who I've spoke to a few times, said, I'm going to vote one because I feel like this is a trick question. I haven't spoke to you. I know it's one. But yeah, it was a mix. There were definitely a lot of podcast professionals saying over 1,000, or at least into like the hundreds option. Definitely not many podcast professionals were saying one. Anyway.
Right. Well, I'll preface my lengthy rant with a story. So when we were at the podcast show in May 2022, so we had a stand there. I spoke there. It was a great event. There was a stand in front of us with another agency who I won't name, who basically almost made a young lad cry, wasn't he? Maybe he was like late teens, early 20s. He had a podcast, and I think, what did he have, like 10 or 20,000 downloads a month or something like that?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Thousands.
Yeah, he was really like doing quite well, working by himself, and only been podcasting a short while. I think it was about 10K a month, and they basically said, come back when you're at 50K a month. You can't monetize until then. And he looked like he was in tears, and you and I were in tears of a different sort, very much hysterics. We're bringing him over to the dark side. Come to our stand. We'll teach you the ways. Look, it depends who you talk to, but I'd say most people in like industry professionals, a lot of them are coming from a media background, a radio background, or production of some sort, and their only means of monetizing is through sponsorship. And the way a lot of these companies work is they will take a cut of your sponsorship as well. So obviously that for them to make any money and it be worthwhile, you need to be earning a lot of money through sponsorship so they can get a cut that's also a lot of money.
Yeah.
Hence why they're basically saying 50,000 a month or, whatever. And on your poll, it said 1,000 plus. I reckon if it was to say 10,000 plus, most of them that clicked on 1,000 plus they'd probably click there. They were probably thinking really high end. Isn't the case. Like there's 17 ways to monetize a podcast. There's probably more. These are just ones that we've been able to implement. It's growing a list all the time. And you can do it with just one. And one thing that we mostly focus on, a lot of our content is about niching down your audience, being very specific with who you're trying to serve. And normally, not everyone has a product or a service, but if you do, well, then you only need one, because you only need one listener to buy your product or service. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't have had that sale if you didn't have your podcast. Yeah. So if, podcast consultancy or production We only need one person to listen to this podcast to join our mentorship program, to join our production agency, to sit some of our educational courses. We only need one person to listen to this podcast to buy that for us to say we've monetized this podcast, which, by the way, is what happened. We monetized this podcast day one from people, when we launched, reaching out saying, can you help me launch my podcast? Yeah, we can. So like, that is one person. And people have it. And that, by the way, was worth like many thousands of pounds straight off the back. So when we say monetize, I'm not saying 20 quid. Yeah, you know, exactly. like actual tangible worthwhile income from your podcast. So yes, obviously the bigger your audience, if you have got thousands, you will make more. It's a numbers game. You can't make money through sponsorship with just one listener, but you can have one person join your community, your mastermind, attend your events, buy your book, you know, buy your courses, buy your mentorship with just one. That's all you need, is just one. And one thing that I really, really like to sort of nail home is podcast downloads, because I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast that, you know, they're at the early stages. One podcast download is worth like 5,000 Instagram followers or YouTube views or like 20,000 TikTok views, probably more, because it's long form, it's informative. You're not worried about capturing their attention. You know, with TikTok, it's like, I don't actually care about providing value. I just care that you listen to 5 seconds of this video. Yeah. So it hits the algorithm. With podcasts, it's long form. It's either educational or entertaining or educational or both. And you build know, like, and trust with your audience. And it's much easier to monetize them to a higher level than it is on other platforms. So if you've only got 50 downloads a week, no problem. You know, we've had dozens of students who are coaches, consultants, they're consultants, they sell courses, they're earning 6 figures a year through people buying their services with only 200 to 500 downloads per month.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's those people that all vote 1,000 plus, in their head, monetizing is definitely ads and sponsorship. That's it. When you say monetize, people think, right, ads and sponsorship. From the days of YouTube, I guess, and that's, you think YouTube, you get 1,000 listeners, boom, you can now advertise. But that's still someone that joins your course or pays for your services and only knows about you through your podcast is still you monetizing through your podcast. And everything we're saying about you only need one listener to monetize is the focus needs to shift from how many downloads to who are my downloads. I spoke to someone on LinkedIn. I'd actually hoping to interview him on this podcast at some point, but his name's Paul and he explains it really well. And he's done exactly the same thing with his podcast, where he actually focuses on his listeners and he reached out to people to get them to listen and tries to find what he calls like leaders of ecosystems to listen to his podcast, because these people right at the top, if they're listening to it, then they're referring all these other people, and the quality of his listener is fantastic. He makes, I'm sure, 6 figures from his podcast, doesn't have a ridiculous amount of downloads, doesn't do any video content, which is controversial. Everyone's saying you need video now. He has no interest in doing video because he knows that everyone listens, well, not everyone, but the majority of his listeners are really high value listeners, and they're the people that refer him, and he gets so many referrals through various things. Everyone knows who he is because he's focused on the who and not the how many.
Absolutely. And actually, we can probably extend this episode a little bit and talk about various creative ways you can monetize a small audience.
Yeah.
For example, I remember speaking to, I can't remember his name, last year. Guy lives in the east of England. He has a small marketing agency, and he's got a good podcast in his niche, but, you know, again, a few hundred downloads a month. But he was charging people £500 to come onto the podcast, and basically it would just be a pitch. So it was framed, it was like a 60-minute long podcast, and it was framed as an interview, and basically the host was interviewing the person, but just pulling out information of how successful they are in case studies. So he was interviewing, you know, PR agencies, marketing agencies, SEO experts, and basically they was just revealing like their best, most successful case studies through the lens of a podcast interview. So for them, they're getting clients, they're getting exposure, and he's getting £500 per episode. He doesn't have to plan the episode. 500 a week, it's like $2,000 a month, and he's only getting a few hundred downloads.
It's thinking outside the box, isn't it?
Exactly.
There's so much more to monetizing than ads and sponsorship, and it doesn't mean that everyone's got to set up a subscription model and you're going to pay ridiculous money for an extra episode. But if you just break it down into what value can you offer, and maybe that's a backlog of content. Maybe you've got recorded courses over the year. I mean, Rob Moore, for those of you who know him, has a fantastic subscription model where he's delivered so many thousands of pounds worth of courses that are all recorded. He has a subscription model where people pay £5 a month and they get access to it. So value for the consumer is off the charts. They're getting thousands of pounds worth of content. Yet for Rob, he's putting in no extra effort for every single person that's on there.
Well, this was interesting because this is something that came up on LinkedIn, wasn't it? When we were talking about subscription sites. Someone's like, oh, no one's going to pay £50 a month for an episode. Yeah. Well, an extra episode. It's like, one, some people will. But two, we're not saying when we're talking about premium content, Patreon, subscription site, whatever you want to call it, it's not just £50 for a podcast episode that used to be free. No. You're still doing your weekly podcast for free, but in addition to that, you're doing a bonus one. And you've got a community with like-minded people in that niche.
And maybe you've got a mastermind within that community.
Yeah, you're doing Ask Me Anything. So like with Rob's, he has over 40 grand a month in revenue from his from that. And he's doing, I think once a month he's doing a masterclass of sorts, so like a Zoom to the group. So that's one thing. If any podcast episode he does an unedited version, like a director's cut, because there's a lot of controversial things. So there's not more content. Well, it is, but he's not producing more content. Yeah. He has a WhatsApp and Facebook group, and he will do like a couple of live meets per year. And it's like £5 a month, 40 grand in revenue, barely having to work any extra, all funneled through, the podcast. But his is like quite cheap. Like he could be way more expensive than that. I won't. Rob's okay saying that, and he's been on the podcast. He doesn't mind, so I won't name other names. But we've got health and safety, for example, podcast where he's got 2 paid for communities. They're both like combined are making like 8 grand a month, and combined there's like a couple of hundred people in them. Yeah. So like when you're very specific, like entrepreneurship and things is a bit, and business is a bit wider, but health and safety professionals, that's like pretty specific. And the companies that he's working with are huge, like builders and construction companies that are worth billions. So they're more than happy to pay 50 to 100 to 200 pound a month for that person to be in that community because of the networking, the that WhatsApp group, the connections you can meet in that's worth 200 pounds a month to $1 billion company. So when people are like, oh, you won't pay 50, yeah, some people will. It's just about identifying a high value niche
and making it worth it to the customer. Like you say, you can't have a free podcast and then be like, oh, now you've got to pay for it.
Yeah,
subscription models almost have a bad perception from some people because they think, oh, you're charging. Who are you to charge people extra? It's optional. It's a case of here's all my free stuff. That's always been free. It's always going to be free. But if you find value in what else I have to offer, the option's there. It's not a case of this is free, but if you want to see the rest of it, pay here. This is free, always has been free, but there's additional stuff. There's help, there's masterminds, communities, whatever it is, coaching, that if you want to, you have this option to pay for it. And podcasting isn't a place where you can sit there on the podcast and just pitch for half an hour. It's one of those you might take a 15-second break in the episode and be like, oh, by the way, in this week's mastermind we talked about this. If you'd be interested in joining, have a check down below. It's as simple as that. It's not a big sale. You're trying to force people here. It's just here's an option.
Well, think how many people pay for the sports channel to watch their favourite football team lose every week?
Yes,
it's like 40 quid a month.
Yeah,
and on top of that, they pay for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. Fucking, you pay for like Deliveroo and never order from it. I'm
a Leeds fan, so the whole Sky Sports thing is a bad mistake.
So it's like subscriptions, just how the world works now.
Yeah.
And I would rather, because I'm a bit of a tight ass, I don't pay for like any extras on my TV, like at all. Like movies, forget it. Sports, forget it. And like I
just about pay for a TV license.
Yeah, basically, through my teeth. So. But for my favourite podcast that I listen to like 2-3 hours a week, if they was to release another hour a week, I would pay them £10 because I listen to them religiously First thing in the morning when I like wake up and I'm getting ready and they release on like those days, like on a Monday, Wednesday and Thursday, it's the first thing I do religiously because it's content. I love the hosts. 2, I love their content more than anything. I would always pay for that. And your fans will feel the same way about you.
Yeah, it all comes down to the value you offer them, doesn't it? And that's the beauty of podcasting, is how much more of a personal relationship it has than other forms of media, which allows you to, from the outside, it might look like, people are paying you for this. But when you have that relationship with your listener and then you're offering them something that they would find extremely valuable at an affordable price, then there's no scam, there's no harm anywhere. It's fair game, such on all behalves.
This is something that you should do. You should put a poll up, another one, and see, would you rather see 3 ad breaks per episode or pay a £5 a month to remove the ads? Because that's it's no extra value, but a lot of big podcasters now, like Stephen Bartlett, it's like $1.99 a month on Apple, you remove the ads. Because if you really like that creator, that you love that content, ads piss people off. Why do you think Netflix done so well? Why do you think TV struggled so much recently? Because people don't enjoy seeing ads. And if you love that creator, I would rather support you by getting more extra benefit from you than support you by listening to, it sounds ridiculous, but minutes on minutes of worth of like ads.
Absolutely, yeah. No, spot on.
Right, well, if anybody wants help on creative monetization strategies, then again, you can reach out down below. Our contact details are in the show notes. And if you want to have a specific episode answered for you, then leave us a review of your question. I'd be more than happy to create one for you. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.